Necromorphs were introduced in the Dead Space 2 game, wherein they appeared as nightmarish, vile creatures who destroyed anything and everything in their path. They were also designed as scary creatures who appeared to be aliens but were slowly revealed to be humans who had been infected by a virus. Today, we will only be exploring them in general and not getting into their subtypes and specific characteristics. Let us explore these terrifying creatures and have a look at the workings of their anatomy. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. Exploring the Necromorph outbreak. The Necromorph outbreak began with the markers, which were huge obelisks with a variety of symbols on them. These markers broadcasted a very specific electromagnetic signal that had the ability to alter dead tissues on a cellular level. As a result of this, the corpse of any living organism could be reanimated as a necromorph once the dead tissues were converted into pure necromorph tissues. These necromorphs were essentially held together by the signals emitted by the markers, and they usually disintegrated in the presence of this electromagnetic signal. Moreover, the electromagnetic signal also had the ability to induce dementia by affecting the minds of living organisms in its vicinity, also causing them to engage in suicidal behavior. Once the living beings were affected by this signal, they ended up killing themselves or the people around them, thereby enabling the process of transforming their dead cells into necromorph cells. This entire process was labeled as the spread of the necromorph infection, which could also spread through the necromorph pathogen. The necromorph pathogens were the reanimated cells created by the markers, and they were exposed to the new host bodies through the unique subtypes of necromorphs known as infectors of swarms. The infectors were formed from a human torso and limbs, and they usually went for the victims' heads and injected them with the pathogen. They traditionally preferred victims with cracked heads so they wouldn't have to break them open on their own, and in some instances it was seen that there were holes drilled in the corpses' foreheads so that the infectors could quickly inject them without much effort. On the other hand, the swarms could infect a large number of corpses at the same time, and they move quickly without sparing any time after their victim's death. In the case of the living victims, large amounts of necromorph tissue consumption led to slow transformation into a necromorph, which usually led them to die of starvation. If they survived, these newly formed necromorphs became feeders. There were different types of necromorphs depending on the location and situation in which the host had died, and some common forms were lurkers, guardians, hunters, and so on. A large number of necromorphs had yellow pustules or sacs that exploded when they were ruptured, and it is suggested that these sacs served as an energy source. Even though this infection was first seen in humans, it was later seen that a necromorph fish had attacked other fishes and killed them, and necromorphs such as the lurkers could even be created from dogs. Various extraterrestrial species residing on the planet of Tau Volantis also showed signs of a necromorph infection, thereby establishing that any species in the world could fall victim to these deadly creatures. When the host body is exposed to the necromorph infection, the person's cells become self-destructive and create new biologically active compounds. These compounds were then metabolized with the help of the reanimated body flesh, which helped them mutate into the terrifying creatures we know as necromorphs. Most of the time their bones were broken and reshaped into newer forms, and this entire process hardly took a few seconds. During this transformation, a lot of heat was generated from their body and even caused the blood in their arteries and veins to start boiling. Their bodies started rupturing due to this, and any bodily organs that weren't necessary were also broken down to give the necromorphs more strength. The necromorphs could be killed due to extreme blood loss since it caused their bodies to stop functioning and eventually become lifeless. However, this is not a guaranteed method to kill a necromorph since they could usually survive some blood loss and injuries. On the other hand, most necromorphs can be destroyed by incinerating their bodies or targeting specific parts of their body and then chopping them off. If a necromorph's head, limbs, or other vital organs were dismembered, they could be killed only on the condition that their most critical organ is targeted. Since there was a wide range of necromorphs with different vulnerabilities, most combatants did not know which organ to target to kill the creature. This strategy was known as strategic dismemberment, and some rules in the game caused a creature to either die or even become even more of a threat if a combatant targets a specific part of their body. The only way to figure out this critical organ was by trial and error methods, and dismembering the necromorphs was essentially the most effective strategy to stop them from causing further damage. They have a brutal reproductive process. Necromorphs named pregnant were primarily involved in the reproductive process. and they were created from the corpse of a single human who undergoes a complex mutation process to generate a body conducive to reproduction. The pregnant's main feature was the huge abdominal sac that covered most of the torso, and this massive sac stored the spawns of the Necromorphs, who were released upon their victim's body. These young Necromorphs then broke free from the sacs and charged towards their victims, and usually included deadly forms of Necromorphs such as swarmers, lurkers, and dividers. The pregnant's body was modified so that the skull's lower jaw was detached and replaced with tentacles hanging from the mouth, and they had 2 arms that sprouted from their back. The pregnant used these arms to attack its opponents, and they usually waited until they were brutally injured to break open their sacs and release the younger Necromorphs, who would then make sure to kill their victims. Since the pregnant carried a huge weight on their body, they had short legs that helped distribute the body weight and maintain balance. While the pregnant had a hard time moving due to their body weight, their legs allowed them to at least speed walk to get to their victims. In Dead Space 3, the pregnant's abdominal sacs were even more swollen, and they primarily released the swarms when the sac burst open. The Necromorphs did not have a usual reproductive process, and they only resorted to releasing their spawn when they were in a dire situation and needed more resources to kill their victims. While we don't know much about their mating procedure, they breed new Necromorphs through these abdominal sacs. What is their nature like? The Necromorph were violent entities that attacked anyone in their field of vision and did not spare any species. They were aggressive and determined to kill anyone who was not infected by the Necromorph infection yet. Their main aim was to spread this infection all over the place, and they were often viewed as killing machines. However, they were not just mindless killers, and they exhibited critical thinking skills and tactical planning while targeting their victims. They also cooperated with each other and often assigned roles to each team member so they could easily corner their victims. This not only displays their strong strategic planning skills, but this is also a testament to their intelligence and communication skills. They sometimes use ventilation shafts to sneak up on their victims or use traps to lure them in. Sometimes the Necromorphs even pretended to be dead in order to get their victims closer before attacking them. They have coordinated their attacks with their teammates and shared consciousness through the Hive Mind or Nexus. Hive Mind was one of the deadliest Necromorph variants created by Marker 3A, and it acted as a communication channel to send the marker signals to other Necromorphs to function in a coordinated manner. Eventually, these signals can be traced to the Brethren Moons, which were gigantic Necromorphs that were considered to be in the final stage of the Necromorph life cycle. Due to their seniority, the Brethren Moons had the ability to manipulate the smaller Necromorphs even from a distance. When the Necromorphs were not infecting their victims, they spent their time wandering around without any destination in mind until they came across a new victim. Sometimes the Necromorphs even captured their victims and then took them to a different place to infect them with ease. All the Necromorphs had their own strategies, while some set up elaborate traps to lure their victims. Some only stood in one place and waited for a new victim to show up. Some of them waited until there were no other humans in the vicinity before feeding on their victims, and they usually made loud noises to intimidate them before actually attacking them. While the Necromorphs work in teams, they did not usually interact a lot with each other and did not seem to have social relationships with each other. They only worked together silently or went their ways to find their victims on their own. However, this behavior showed some changes in Dead Space 2, wherein the Necromorphs known as Stalkers worked in a group and even directly communicated with each other in the form of strange noises. Some crucial details about the Necromorph physiology from Dead Space 3. In Dead Space 3, a lot of the Necromorphs were left to their own devices for very long periods in the absence of prey. They often curled up in a patch of the corruption and tried to conserve their energy until a new victim showed up. However, this process took years, and the Necromorphs often ended up developing a fungus-like texture on their body. This was seen in a particular situation wherein Isaac and Carter approached the 200-year-old CMS Roanoke ship and encountered a bunch of mummified Necromorphs. Some of the other Necromorphs were also seen with new man-made weapons, which was a little out of place since Necromorphs did not usually use such weapons. This indicated an evolution wherein the Necromorphs may have gained more intelligence and were adapting to new ways of attacking their victims. Some Necromorphs, such as the Creepers, also exhibited such evolutionary behavior, and they were able to wield a gun with ease after taking over the host bodies of ex-soldiers or officers. Even though they were not skilled shooters, these Necromorphs did evolve over time and gain new abilities. It was suggested that this could be because many hosts' bodies died while holding a gun or a weapon to defend themselves, and that they might just be holding these weapons after being reanimated as a Necromorph. how do their lungs work? As seen in the case of the necromorphs known as pregnant, they have huge abdominal sacs that take up most of the space in their body. They even have short limbs and no lower jaw, among other bodily alterations, since most of the corpse's bones and muscles are directed towards creating an abdominal sac. This makes sense as to why there is no space for lungs or such other vital bodily organs. Moreover, the necromorphs could survive in dire situations and unsuitable environments such as space. This explains why they don't need any lungs, since they don't need to perform respiration or any vascular activity in order to keep surviving. Since they were practically undead, the necromorphs did not need to breathe and they were resistant to many injuries related to loss of blood or breathing difficulties.
This one's regenerating!
How are you going to kill it?
I'm not!
What determines whether a human dies or reanimates as a necromorph? To be reanimated as a necromorph, a human corpse has to be infected by the necromorph virus by either infestors or swarmers. Infestors only had a restricted capacity to infect only a set number of humans at a time, and they often ran out of the infection seed that was used to reanimate humans as necromorphs. Sometimes the humans got lucky and escaped this fate if the infestors were out of the seed. Otherwise, they were usually victims of a procedure wherein their bodily cells started reanimating with a new genetic code that turned them into the necromorphs. In Dead Space, some of the markers such as Marker 3A were man-made and were not considered strong enough to spread the infection to a considerable extent. In such cases, it makes sense that the human died and was not reanimated due to a weak infection. Moreover, the USG Kellyan arrived at the USG Ishimura during the time of the game, and sometimes there was not enough for the marker to create an infection to transform all dead humans on Ishimura before their downfall. In this case, the humans died after being attacked, but were not reanimated as necromorphs due to a lack of time and resources. What is the status of the upcoming Dead Space remake? While fans have been looking forward to a Dead Space remake for quite a while, Motive Studio and the game's creators have announced that the remake is complete and set for release and distribution on the 27th of January 2023. Rumors about the remake first began around July 2021, and it was stated that Motive Studios is creating a remake in the same horror setting as the original game. The game is also set to follow the same storyline as the original game, wherein an engineer named Isaac Clarke goes on a mission to look into a huge planetary mining ship. As the game progresses, Clarke tries to figure out the problem with the ship when monsters show up from within the shadows and launch an attack. Motive Studios also released a 20-minute long gameplay from the upcoming remake on their YouTube channel, and it shows shots of Isaac exploring the ship vessel and finding out about the alien creatures who were attacking it. The game has not only received a huge graphical update, but it also included voiceovers for the characters. While the original game only had a silent protagonist, this new remake promises a new dimension to the characters. There will also be various editions of the game, ranging from a standard edition to a gold and even a collector's edition, and we cannot contain our excitement for the remake's release. Conclusion. To sum it up, the Necromorphs were very deadly creatures that went well with Dead Space's horror vibe. They were always lurking around while looking for a chance to infect someone, and the combatants had a hard time ensuring they were safe from them. They also had a unique anatomy and were undoubtedly one of the most terrifying creatures introduced in a game setting. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.